Welcome to Don't Talk to Robots. This is a video response for Scott, Tony, and Eddy's 2-year anniversary Broughaha Robot Jr. What does that mean? We'll get into it. This is our minifigure. It is Flynn from Tron. Cool minifigure. Alright, if you don't know these 3 channels, shame on you. No shame. This is a shame-free channel. But you should know about Scott from Reindeer Studios, Tony from Tony Black, and Eddy from Eddy's Baseball Autographs. 3 great channels. My brother, Flying Dutchman Cards, told me about them way back in the day when I first started getting into YouTube and baseball YouTube. And yeah, they've been supporters of my channel as well. So I'm excited because their video response was to make a custom card. And I don't know if you guys have heard of Pop Fly Shop. He is an artist. He makes baseball players, but as like comic book covers. So he does a comic book cover, but it's a baseball player. So he started off with Dale Murphy. There's Will Clark, Hank Aaron. There's a ton of them. A couple weeks ago, he did one for the Big Red Machine, and it was like a mech. Like it was a Big Red Machine was the cover of the comic book cover. So that gave me some inspiration behind what the custom card I want to do is. So my custom card is going to include a little bit of this. It is going to include a little bit of this and a little bit of this kind of stuff. Put your feet up and we're going to do some time lapse, and I'm going to show you how I came up with my custom card. So I show this because I started off with this as a reference for kind of the pose that I wanted to get. I wanted to get Ken Griffey Jr. kind of in a dynamic pose that you wouldn't see necessarily because of photography and photographers aren't on the field, that type of thing. But it could just it never quite looked quite right. So here's some, this is the early stages. We have the Space Needle kind of framed out there as a 3D object. Use your imaginations. And then a player, Ken Griffey Jr. This was going to be kind of the basis for the robot, but I scrapped this because it wasn't working. And also with this view, you got a lot of the legs of the robot and not quite as much with the top of the robot, so it didn't really look well. So scratch this. Let's move on. Moving on to my third idea, I had this old Gundam robot I got this back in high school, still had it, and so this turned out a lot better because it's got robot shapes. I do basically a lot of tracing. There's a lot of elements that I kept, some of them that I tweaked. Having that circle element in the center of his chest comes in handy later on. The number one challenge with this was I had to borrow my oldest daughter's iPad and her iPencil or Apple Pencil, whatever it's called, and she's always drawing. So I had to try to find times late at night when she was done drawing to borrow it. So this gave me the basic outline that I was looking for my robot. Now we get into adding the textures to the robot. This is something that I was inspired to do from Reindeer Studios. I love how you can see all of the different elements that he uses to add color and textures to his illustrations. That center object, if you don't know what it is, a little Easter egg, it is the top of the Kingdom where Ken Griffey Jr.'s fame first started to grow. I had to do a little bit of editing to make sure that it didn't look like a certain human body part of the human anatomy. Use your imaginations. And this was a lot of fun, just getting in here, adding different colors and textures. Yeah, so I'll let you take a look till we get to something I can add some more comments about. Went with some classic Seattle Mariners colors here with the blue and the gold. We have some of the gray, and then added a lot of kind of textures and metal, kind of scraped up metal to make it look robotic as best as possible. There you go, there's some textures. I wasn't lying. The 380 on the shoulder element there, that is in reference to one of Ken Griffey Jr.'s favorite, most famous catches against that wall. He also busted up his wrist doing that, but that is something I added there. Another cool thing is these little speakers textures I added there. You could see one of my Bubba's friends called. I had to tell him, I'm making a robot. Call back later. But the speaker textures, I added that in because when Ken Griffey Jr. got his first big contract, he bought a new sound system for the Kingdom. And so I always remember going to the Kingdom and seeing those up there, and just thought that was cool that Ken Griffey Jr. is like, we need a new sound system. It's on me. So that's why I added those little elements. As you can see, also added his number on the little flap there. And yeah, we're getting pretty good here with the textures, adding some shadows. Yeah, I've never done a play-by-play. All right, so now I'm adding some elements. These are some baseball bats, and there is 7 baseball bats I added for his 7 silver sluggers, and there is 10 little baseballs, and those are added for 10 gold gloves. Got to take a break because Flying Dutchman Cards and the fam called. Wanted to include a picture of the Space Needle in the background, as if the Ken Griffey Jr. mech was stopping like an asteroid or some interstellar thing to come in, and so he's saving Seattle, basically downtown Seattle, with his giant mech. And so that is why I added the Space Needle. No robot is complete without some lines going through the background, you know, like you saw in old Voltron cartoons, the action lines. So I basically just searched up anime lines, I think, or something like that, and I found this cool image to kind of, oh yeah, my computer was freaking out at that point. So I'm like, I'm gonna make sure I save. But there we go, look at that. That is pretty cool. Get the Space Needle in there, and it took a little reworking, trying to figure out a good color scheme for the background, but loving how those lines fit in there. Now here I'm just kind of finishing up what I can do on the background. One thing I wanted to add that I always like about Reindeer Studio Scott's illustrations is he adds a nice little white line around the outside. So I do that here using Photoshop. It's a little easier than tracing it by hand. One thing I would go back and do is maybe zoom in on the robot. Once I printed this out, the full screen view was a little too small to see all the details that I wanted to include. So lesson learned there. So here is the final product, my Ken Griffey Jr. mech card. Up at the top I included a photo of the pilot, as Ken Griffey Jr. will be piloting this mech of his, nicknamed Junior. It has the same nickname as him. Go figure. For this view, I was kind of going for, if you ever go to like a model shop, or I even saw one at Target this weekend of a Gundam like model kit. It has a crazy illustrated photo of the robot and then like the name of the robot and script, that type of thing. So that's kind of what I was going for here. As well as I've got a little picture of Griffey as the pilot, quote unquote, of the mech. I wanted to hand draw that or make it more illustrated, but just ran out of time. But I love that picture of Griffey blowing the bubble. Thought that was appropriate for the mech. And so I like how this turned out. Again, it when you see it on the card, it's a little tiny, but here it is in all of its glory. I had a lot of fun with the back of the card. I love how Donruss has just kind of a generic back that they use over and over, very simple. So I kind of went with that type of feel, just a solid orange color with black on it on the back. I obviously reused a lot of the elements from the front to make it easier, but I think it adds some nice symmetry with the front. As with any youngster of my age, well, you're not a youngster anymore, but if you ever collected Transformers from back in the 80s, they always had really cool stats. And so that's what I was kind of going for the meat of this card here in the middle. So we can see that he has great defense. Durability, not quite so good as Ken Griffey Jr. was oft injured during his career. His flight was amazing. His power, you can see there below 630 home runs on the career. Amazing, and really good speed as well. So up at the top, we've got his center field position, his date of birth, when he was drafted. Down below, some of his stats from his career, WAR at bats, all that good stuff. And then the last line, I put in some of his kind of awards, different things. So Hall of Fame in 2015, MVP in 1997, All-Star Game, he had 13 of those, 10 Gold Gloves, 7 Silver Sluggers. That is the back of the card. Oh, and then there's a little Don't Talk to Robots logo and copyright, because those are fun to do. And so yeah, really enjoyed making these cards. And that is all from this view. We'll go back to the other view. All right, that was intense. So here is my final product. It is the Junior robot. So we have Ken Griffey Jr. as the pilot up there. And there's the card. I think it turned out pretty well. My printer didn't print it out as nicely as I would have liked. Like, you lose a little bit of detail in the background. But I think it turned out pretty cool. It was a lot of fun to do. And here's the back. This was really tiny. Like, it's very hard for me to read these. Maybe with Zoom you can read them. So that is my custom card. This is my video response entry into these 3 channels. Great contest. If you have not already, pause this video. Go check out the links in the description. Subscribe to all these channels. Support them. Great members of the card community. Love all of their videos. All right, that's all I got. Make sure that you don't forget to don't talk to robots, and rock and roll.